Okay. This is the fan book again. Part 2. Feelings of panic. Told from Tuli's perspective. Tuli, I think it's about time for bed, Mom said as she laid out my covers. I'll sleep once I'm finished this one, I replied quickly but carefully crocheting one last red flower. I cut away the leftover thread and made a few final touches before setting aside my needle, leaning back and stretching hard as I admired the finished decoration. You certainly have gotten busy now that you're a Laharo, Mom noted. Mine's to blame for that, I said with pursed lips as I put my needle away in my toolbox. Ever since I had started working for the Gilberta Company as a Laharo apprentice, Mrs. Karina and Mr. Otto began taking a bunch more orders for flower ornaments. Mine had apparently done something during the Star Festival. All the nobles went to, and out of nowhere, we had received a ton more customers. I thought that maybe Lady Bridget's dress had been a big hit, but not many people were ordering clothes, just our flower ornaments. As a hairpin maker, this meant I was super busy. There were other people in the workshop making flower ornaments, but I had the most experience and could make a wider variety of decorations, so most orders ended up going to me. Mine was also giving me picture books and letters containing hidden messages about new ways to make lace and other things, and since nobody else knew the codes, I was naturally the first one to actually make them. I would learn the techniques myself, attempt to make the decorations, and then pass this information on to the others. In other words, I had ended up in a teaching position of sorts in the workshop. While I was happy to have so much responsibility after fighting to secure my position as a Laharo, all I ever did was make hairpins. I didn't feel like I was getting much better as a seamstress. I want to do more work of clothes, I murmured. I promised to make some for mine, but all I'm making are hairpins. True, Mom replied, but once you've learned some more etiquette, you'll start getting brought along to the noble estate for orders, right? Yeah, but... I sighed. Etiquette was hard, and it was impossible to know where you needed to improve without someone else to guide you. To make matters worse, Les was getting better and better at carrying himself, and it was making me so jealous. We were supposed to be equals when it came to getting dragged around by mine, but he was getting closer and closer to the nobility, while I got stuck lagging behind. This past summer, Les had gone to a far-off province called Ilgner and stayed there until winter preparation started. He said that he was figuring out how to make new kinds of paper. Anyway, super important nobles would soon be going to Ilgner, so Les had to practice really advanced etiquette. The great priests who served nobles taught everyone who went. I was busy with hairpins and didn't have teachers like that, so I thought it was kind of unfair. Why don't you have Les teach you, Mom asked. He's busy. And that's mine's fault, too. He was constantly running between the ink and carpentry workshops since he'd brought back a ton of things from Ilgner for them to experiment with. Camille's lucky. Mine gives him toys, not work. Les had recently delivered a new toy mine had ordered from a carpentry workshop, a box with poles of various shapes cut into the thin board on top and some blocks that were designed to fit through them. Each block could only be pushed through a certain hole, and while Camille had only managed to figure out the circle one so far, he loved playing with it anyway. Camille really liked Les since he was the one who always brought him toys. If things continued like this, I half expected Camille to end up as an apprentice at the planting company with Les' introduction. Hey Mom, do you think Camille's also going to live his whole life being dragged around by mine? Maybe, but that'll be his decision to make. You're doing this because you want to, right? I mean, what you're making there, that's a winter hairpin for mine, isn't it? Mom asked, pointing at the red flower on the table. She was right on the money. I faltered a little as I delicately picked up the decoration. Mine hasn't sent any new orders, even though the season's about to change. What else can I do but make something for her and take it to her directly? She's the Archduke's daughter now. It'd be shameful if she wore the same hairpins every year. I need to make sure she doesn't embarrass herself. Why not just admit you want to see her again, Mom asked with a chuckle. I puffed out my cheeks in response. Mine's been so busy lately, I can't just say I want to see her for my own sake. I couldn't help but wonder if she didn't actually care about seeing me. Maybe she loved her noble family more than us now. Not really. They don't even give her hugs. They don't give her hugs like you guys do. It was hard to admit that I wanted to see her when my thoughts kept straying in that direction. I picked up the rest of the half-completed hairpin. There was a feeling of unease in my chest, but I shrugged it off and gave Mom a small smile. I just want mine to be healthy again, I said. You know, Les mentioned she found all the ingredients for her medicine. Right. Mine will finally be healthy again, Mom said. She wore a conflicted smile, looking both happy and sad. and I completely understood why. We were both so glad about mine getting better, but as she moved even further beyond being the sickly, always a collapsing girl we knew, we felt as though we were being left behind. Mine, don't go too far just yet, I thought, caressing the red decorative flower in my hand. I still need to become a first-rate seamstress. Hopefully you get to work on some clothes soon. Ooh, an original story written for this fanbook. Nice, the start of life as a retainer. Lady Brunhilde, Lady Rosemine is inquiring as to your interest in serving as her retainer, Riarda said. I must note she was raised in the temple and has only recently awoken from a 2-year slumber, so she's lacking in ways that are unthinkable for most nobles. Compensating for this will place a considerable burden on all her retainers. Even knowing this, would you be willing to serve as her apprentice attendant? Riarda served as Lady Rosemine's head attendant, and she had come to me with this inquiry the day Lady Rosemine arrived at the Royal Academy. It honestly came as quite the relief. I had worried that I had come on too strong when welcoming Lady Rosemine, especially considering that Laisletta had felt it right necessary to step in. I had long awaited Lady Rosemine's awakening. My father even said that if I am to serve anyone, it should be her. Oh my, that is very much like Keeb Groschel. Due to having been constrained by Lady Veronica in the past, the Lysgang nobles had selected Lady Rosemine, the daughter of Lord Cardstead, and Lady Elvira as the Archduke candidate their faction would support. I had a deep connection with the Lysgangs as the daughter of Keeb Groschel, and my father had explicitly ordered me to support her. I had also been instructed to discover the Ob's reason for abruptly adopting Lady Rosemine, as well as why he had assigned Riarda, his own retainer, to serve as her head attendant, instead of selecting a Lysgang noble or someone from Lord Bonavash's family. Well, probably because he trusts her the most, so he would assume that having someone that he could trust implicitly would be able to best handle Lady Rosemine. So I'm assuming that's why. And to help her when she needs it. I imagine Father and the others are acting with the wisdom I lack, but in my opinion, it made far more sense to have such stealthy intelligence gathering to apprentice scholars such as Hartmut. I wanted only to grow closer to Lady Rosemine and assist her in spreading trends, such as her hairpins and new recipes throughout the sovereignty. I have finally been given permission to begin circulating trends. The last thing I want is to waste what little time I had left in the Royal Academy on such political trivialities. I gladly accept, Lady Riarda. We shall now be serving the same Lady Brunhilde. You may just call me Riarda. The rooms for retainers were located across from those of the Archduke candidates, so I was instructed to move to my new accommodations. I see these are designed the same as Archnoble rooms, I observed. It seemed that Archnobles were so commonly taken as retainers of Archduke candidates that the interiors were fashioned with this in mind. The rooms were unusually large and decorated with furniture that was fancy by men noble standards. Although it was nothing new to me, I looked around, at which point Angelica came to summon me. You can leave your belongings to the servants and your own attendants, she said. Please go greet Lady Rosemine. Understood. I gave instructions to my attendants and then stepped out into the corridor, where I found Lady Rosemine's new retainers all gathered outside her room. Laisletta, a 4th-year apprentice med attendant, popular among other attendants for her careful work and refined demeanor, was busy speaking to Angelica. I had heard that she wished to serve Lady Rosemine out of gratitude. Her mother serves as an attendant to Lady Florencia, and her older sister Angelica as Lady Rosemine's apprentice guard knight. At least in regard to faction politics, there's no need to be on guard against her. Standing beside Angelica and enthusiastically listening to her conversation was Judith, a violet-eyed girl in her 2nd year. She was the daughter of a knight who guarded the country gate in Kernberger. I had heard she was especially well trained as a knight for someone her age, and that she was aiming to join Lady Rosemine's retainers out of admiration for Angelica. Kernberger isn't particularly close to the former Veronica faction, so she should not necessitate too much caution either. Feline, well, you were chosen too? I'm glad we get to work together, Judith exclaimed, her excitement clear in her voice. You wrote stories for Lady Rosemine's sake the entire time she was asleep. I'm happy for you, Laisletta added, gesturing Feline over with a kind smile. Feline hesitantly walked over, fearful due to being a mere first-year lay noble. Back in the playroom, she was said to have not been confirmed as a retainer, but perhaps Lady Rosemine had forced the matter despite her advisor's concern. First Daniel, now Feline. Lady Rosemine certainly seems to take whomever she pleases as her retainers, regardless of status, of course. Lady Rosemine was naturally free to choose anyone she pleased, but there was many who wished to be the retainer of an archducal family member. More than a few students were no doubt displeased with a lay noble being chosen in their place. If we fellow retainers did not protect her with great care, Feline will certainly be crushed. She was simply too young and of too low a status to protect herself. That said, is Lady Rosemind not meant to be a beacon of hope for the Lysgang faction? I saw no Lysgang faces among her new retainers. That was not to say she lacked other Lysgang retainers entirely, considering that her brother Cornelius was among her guard knights, but still, was it overthinking things to view this selection, as an attempt to somewhat distance herself from the Lysgangs? I don't think she's really thinking about that. She's just thinking about who she wants to make a good retainer, regardless of faction. "Oh my, am I late?" came a voice from behind. I turned and saw Lenore, a 4th-year knight, striding over. I sighed in relief. She was a Lysgang noble, much like myself, meaning I had an ally after all. "I see you have been chosen as well, Lenore." "Indeed, I hope we can use this opportunity to grow even closer," she replied. We had spent much time together due to being of similar age, and our parents often visiting each other, so I was positively overjoyed that she was here as an apprentice guard knight. "Lady Rosemind, may I allow your retainers in?" Angelica asked, standing by the door. I heard Rosemind reply, "You certainly may," from somewhere inside, so we lined up in order of status and followed Angelica into the room. Goodness, what a massive room! Ooh, we get some stuff, Let me see. Gallery, retainer. This is my room. Oh, this is the map of this area, okay. The dormitory, okay. Let's see. So, this is the gallery. Retainers rooms, clothing room, changing room, bath, washroom. And you guys can pause that and read that if you want. It was my first time entering the personal room of an Archducal family member, and the sheer size absolutely stunned me. It was hard to imagine this was all for a single... That was all a single room? The retainer's room was right here. This is my room. Really? Okay. It was hard to imagine this was all for a single person. Chairs of identical design were lined up to the left of the entryway, most likely used to accommodate additional guests during tea parties. The right wall was decorated with art and embroidered tapestries, pieces presumably made by Lady Rosemind herself. No. I'm assuming that was already there. So it's not hers. She had already proven her musical talent during her debut, but it seemed she was an expert in even more regards. I let out a satisfied sigh as I recalled the music she had played and the spectacular blessing it had produced. Just how much would she have all had grown had the sleep not taken those 2 years from her? Truly a shame. I agree. I wonder how she would have been if she had those 2 years. Lady Rosemind was seated at the far end of a round table located directly in front of the door. She looked much too young to be attending the Royal Academy, and I instantly recalled when I had greeted her during her first winter playroom. She had hardly aged a day since then. Well, I mean, she did sleep for 2 years, so her body didn't grow, so yeah. She was sitting on a cushion to put her at a reasonable height above the table, and the floor was but a distant dream for her feet. She looked so young and innocent that I was struck with the urge to give whoever had attacked her a firm telling off. A firm telling off? You should have done more than that. She would struggle here with her youthful form, but we attendants would have quite a time ahead of us as well, since we needed to ensure she experienced no inconvenience while living here. Though, naturally, I will accomplish that with aplomb. With resolve in my heart, I knelt before Lady Rosemind with all the beauty expected of a daughter of Guy Groschel. Lady Rosemind, I am ever so delighted that you selected me. You may count on me to make your trends fashionable. Indeed, I intend to rely on you quite heavily when it comes to social matters, Brunhilde. She not only praised my achievements when it came to researching trends, but also entrusted me with matters of socializing with the other duchies. I was so happy to have been given the job I wanted, and to have been recognized for my efforts, that I struggled to contain a grin. My mind wandered to potential ways I could spread Ehrenfest trends throughout the academy, and the next thing I knew, Lasletta had finished her greetings as well. Milady, I will teach the 2 apprentice attendants about the work that needs to be done here. Riarda said, briskly walking deeper into the room. We followed. Now then, I will explain Lady Rosamind's room and what you will be doing as apprentice attendants. It is structured the same as her room in the castle, though the furniture is a mishmash of what belonged to former candidates, so each part is a little different. It seemed most of the furniture being passed down was true for our rooms as well. A closer look revealed how seasoned many of the pieces were. On the left wall of the main room was a furnace, and against the right was a bookshelf and a study desk. There were also a chair for practicing Harspiel, a bench for lounging, and some shelves for decoration, as well as plants and a screen that seemed to hide a more private space. At the back was a bed large enough to fit Lady Rosamund several times over. I couldn't help but wonder just how many copies of her it could accommodate. I don't know, probably at least a few. So the further back one goes, the more personal the room becomes. In which case, the circular table with chairs where Lady Rosamund was currently sitting was not for lounging at, but was rather within the most public and formal area of the room. I turned around a bit. Riarda, I am aware the Royal Academy has rooms for tea parties, since those from other duchies cannot enter the dorms. But are tea parties ever held in the rooms of Archduke candidates, I asked? When Lady Charlotte begins attending the Academy next year, I imagine she and Lady Rosamund will want to have tea parties together here. They are fairly close. I had been told that Lady Rosamund was attacked on the night of Lady Charlotte's baptism ceremony, and she hadn't awoken until 2 years later at the end of autumn. When exactly had they had the opportunity to develop any sort of bond? Lady Rosamund had hardly attended this year's winter playroom, so I had almost never seen them there together. Here in the Royal Academy, the circular table is also used for Lady Rosamund's retainers to give their reports, help her with classwork, and discuss preparations for any tea party she is due to hold. Discussions which require male retainers are held in a meeting room on the first floor. Since you specified here in the Royal Academy, does that mean the table has a different purpose in the castle, I asked. We can discuss that when we return there. It was true that we didn't need to know immediately. It was a matter that could wait. When I taught others, I often taught in order of immediate importance as well. As I nodded to myself, I noticed Laisletta tilt her head. Is something the matter, Laisletta? I see the book boxes are by the bench, but is that not incorrect? I believe they are normally positioned closer to the studying desk, she said. On the closer examination, I also noticed the 2 book boxes placed between the bed and the bench. They were blunt, crude boxes that stood out amid the colorful red and pink of the lounge area. Riarda glanced over at Lady Rosamund and shook her head. They are where they need to be, she said with a sigh. It seems that Milady cannot properly relax without a book in her hands. She spends almost all her free time reading, but also completely loses sight of her surroundings in the process, so I managed the keys to the boxes and to her bookshelf. It is important to lock them after 7th bell, for she will never sleep otherwise. I had heard of Archduke candidates being encouraged to read, but this was my first time hearing of one who needed to have their reading time limited. Judging from what Lady Riarda had said, I could guess that Lady Rosamund's love for books was intense enough to negatively impact her life. Yep. Speaking of which, I do recall her flipping through outrageously thick books in the children's playroom. At the time, I had assumed this was to show that she was learning alongside the others despite having already finished her studies, but it turned out she just loved to read. Behind the bed is the door to her hidden room. We will enter it only when we are invited inside to clean. I nodded, looking up at the bed. It was fairly old with thick curtains around it, and the bedding was covered in beautiful embroidery. It took only a glance to know it was of much higher quality than what archnobles used. This is the changing room where she will wash her hands, and there you see a door leading to the bath. The green face stone pitcher you see by the wash basin is connected to the basement's water container. You will pour water into the bath with this, then warm it with the blue face stone. These are magic tools for exclusive use in the bath. I have learned about these in class, but Brunhilde is a 3rd year, so she has not yet. It is fine, Laisletta. I have similar tools in my home, and am familiar with their usage. While there was a notable difference in size, the changing room and such functioned just as they did in my estate. Laisletta would most likely struggle with this more than I would, considering how her family shared their bath, wash basin, and the like. The necessary tools for bathing are all contained within this box, Riarda said. Be sure to return them when the hot water has been prepared. I was aware Lady Rosamund had invented Rensham, and I was pleasantly surprised to see a jar of it carrying a scent I was unfamiliar with. The recipes had likely been prepared especially for her. As my heart thumped with joy at being in the presence of such a cutting-edge product, I confirmed the location of the laundry baskets and massage oils. Please put the laundry into this basket with the blue tag. When she has finished changing in the morning, send her used clothes down to the basement via the dumbwaiter so that the servants below may clean them. Her change of clothes are in the clothing room. The clothing room had rows of shelves stretching all the way to the back wall. There were underwear, underclothes, overclothes, shoes, accessories, and extra cloth for repairing any tears. Her Royal Academy clothes are stored here, as are class-specific clothes like her riding outfit, Riarda said, beginning to gesture in particular shelves. Her normal clothes are here. Special outfits for socializing are here as well, just in case. Bedding is over here. Sewing tools and irons are on this shelf. Please wear these aprons when preparing the bath and working with water. It seemed our work tools were kept in the clothing room as well. Lady Rosemine's things were kept separate from our attendant things, so we would not struggle to distinguish them. This is the area for tools, Riarda explained as she entered a space connected to the clothing room. The first thing I saw inside was a sizable table. It is nearly identical to the one in the castle, so as to make my work easier. Please return any tools you use to the exact place you find them. This is the retainer's room, she continued. It is where we discuss matters among ourselves, do work that we do not wish for our lady to see, and generally keep in contact. The shelves store not just dishes, but sweets and tea for Our Lady. You may use this table for a bit of mending or rest when necessary. She then opened a cabinet to show us the tea-making tools, going on to describe which tea Lady Rosemine preferred. I see, she prefers a 2-to-1 ratio of teagapt to urge with a sizable quantity of gravach milk. The cart used to carry the tea is here. This here is the dumbwaiter I mentioned earlier, which is used to exchange goods with the servants in the basement. Once the laundry has been placed in the blue tag basket, pour mana into this to send it down. It will return with clean laundry by 6 bell. When you want water heated, send it down with this tag. It will return once heated, and then you can use this blue face stone pitcher to pour the tea. Use this tag when you need sweets. After explaining all the different tag colors and shapes so that we could use the dumbwaiter properly, Riarda unlocked a particular cabinet with the key. This is where Milady's potions are stored. My boy Ferdinand has entrusted me with managing these, so speak to me whenever Milady looks ill. This is a list of warnings I was given when I first began serving her. Look over it later when you have the time. Understood. I quickly skimmed the wooden board of warnings and discovered it was filled to the brim with arcane instructions regarding limiting her reading time and enforcing ideal exercise. The details were so precise that I found myself at a loss for words, whereas Lizette appeared over the board with a small smile on her face. You may read it first, Brunhilde. My sister has spoken a bit of Lady Rosemine's ill health. She has restrictions even for tea parties. I see. I have much to learn before socializing with the other duchies begins. The box of potions was considerably large. It likely contained more than they expected to use, but still there was an impressive amount inside. I recalled the potions I had prepared for myself prior to leaving, and truly came to understand just how poor Lady Rosemine's health was. Apprentice attendants wake up at first bell and dress themselves. Breakfast is held at second bell, so we must prepare Milady for the day before then. Begin by cleaning her room lightly with magic tools. By the time you are finished, her guard knights will have gathered themselves in the retainer's room, and you may confirm among yourselves which classes you need to attend and who is going to be guarding her that day. Once that is done, you will wake her up. Lady Rosemine had been strictly instructed not to leave her bed before being summoned by her attendants. Because of this, when she had a book she strongly wanted to read, she would hide it in a desk drawer or under her pillow in advance, or even start reading it early in the morning. Just how much does she love books, I wondered. All the work-related concerns Riarda had discussed seemed to be related to Lady Rosemine's ill health and obsession with reading. You all should know the flow of morning preparations, as all noble women share the same general process. Once those have been completed, it is time for breakfast. While we would wait for her to finish eating and then have her leftovers in the castle, here in the Royal Academy we eat alongside her in the dining hall. When I say to clean up the baskets, you must swiftly go from the changing room, through the clothing room, and into the retainer's room to do just that. You must then return to her main room and gather in front of the door where your attendants will be. Riarda will check Lady Rosemine in the mirror, and we will prepare to leave for the dining hall until they are ready. We would then briefly commune with our attendants to ensure maximum grace. Following breakfast, we prepare for classes and move to the common room. This is when Milady begins to read, and taking her to classes becomes quite the challenge. Please take care to ensure she can socialize with other students in the common room. Given that Milady has such poor health and spent 2 years asleep, she has overwhelmingly fewer connections than others. It is true that she will need to socialize with other Ehrenfest students before she can begin thinking about socializing with other duchies, I replied. She had spent a full winter with the first, second, and third years in the playroom, but no more than 10 days with the older students before they departed for the Royal Academy. Brunhilde, is it not first necessary for Lady Rosemine to grow familiar with her retainers? Lizetta asked. We are almost all new faces to her. I am sure she will struggle to relax in her room before she can properly come to know us. I nodded emphatically. I also struggled to relax in my room following a change of attendance. Much time would pass with us searching for each other out, not quite being on the same page, and experiencing minor emotional disturbances. I would go into my hidden room when necessary to calm myself, but I would not have been able to grow used to them had I remained locked away forever. On top of that, Lady Rosamund had more retainers than I did, so she would take even longer to adjust than I normally would. Out of all her retainers, only Riarda, Cornelius, and Angelica had served her prior to her coming to the Royal Academy. She will likely grow accustomed to you faster than she will me, Laysletta, for you look quite like Angelica, I said. Perhaps you and Riarda can handle duties which require touching her, while I focus on cleaning and preparing tea, among other minor duties. Very well, Laysletta replied. You have been entrusted with matters of socializing, Brunhilde, so please focus your efforts on that. An archnoble will accomplish much more than a men noble such as myself ever could. As Laysletta and I decided our respective shares of the work, Riarda clapped her hands together. I am glad to see you working together as good friends, but my explanation comes first. Do not forget to change into your attendant work clothes after returning from your classes. From there, Lady Rosamund will change into her lounging clothes. You will then have free time until dinner. While she described it as free time, there would not be all that long between us finishing our classes and dinner starting. Following dinner, you will prepare the bath. Some will then help her bathe, while others prepare the bed. Oh yes, and do not forget to ask her which massage oil she wishes to use before she enters the bath. Her preferences vary based on her mood. Once she exits the bath, one attendant will massage her while another cleans the bath and prepares tea. Apprentices may leave once Lady Rosamund has finished bathing. After her bath, Lady Rosamund will drink tea, read, and then study for the next day's classes until it was time for bed. You both have experience as attendants, so I will not be too strict with how you spend your free time or when you sleep, Riarda concluded. Just ensure you rest enough that it does not interfere with your work the next day. Understood. That is how Riarda explained Lady Rosamund's daily schedule to us when we first arrived, but I trailed off, picking up my cup and looking at Laysletta. She took a leftover cookie and gave a refined laugh. Few things go according to plan, do they? Perhaps the castle is different. It must be. There's no library there, so there is no need for her to pull out all the stops. Due to the Better Grades Committee and a few careless words from Lord Wolfried, Lady Rosamund had woken up earlier than her attendants to begin writing out worksheets, among other things. In addition to that, a tea party with the music professors had been scheduled before we could even finish carefully reading the instructions Lord Ferdinand had given us. Everything was an enormous mess, to say the least, and I was being dragged around so much that I could feel my skill as an attendant climbing dramatically by the day. Lady Rosamund is about to finish her classes soon, yes? I cannot believe she has such incredible focus. Indeed, she needs retainers to accompany her to the library, so we are being quite rushed ourselves. Laysletta and I exchanged a chuckle, sipping tea and sharing a break in the retainers' room while Lady Rosamund and Feline dedicated themselves to making study resources at the circular table. Her stay at the Royal Academy had only just begun. Huh? There are spoilers up to part 3. Well, I've already read that, so, I mean, there's not really spoilers for me now. How long have I been reading? Only 28 minutes. Huh. And that was only one story. No, that was 2, I mean. 2 stories. Ooh, let's see. The recording session for Ascendance of Bookworm's first drama CD. Ooh, drama CD. I gotta see this. So this is for the Japanese one. Okay. Oh, come on. Huh? Oh, this is her panda bus. Oh my god. Fortnite shaped sword. Oh dear. Jesus Christ, what the heck is going on here? It's a mishmash of stuff. Oh dear. Oh dear Lord. What the heck? How much more do I have for this thing? Okay, you guys can pause it because I don't even know if I'm going to be able to read all. Okay, there we go. Recording report. Huh? Oh, this is the report for the thingy. Dear God Almighty. Oh, is this a family tree? Come on, teeny tiny. Okay, this is a Q&A. Ooh, we got some questions here about the Bookworm world. Question. In part 1, Gunter and Otto go drinking on their way home from work, but it was nighttime by that point and presumably dark out. Are there street lamps in the lower city? There are iron fire baskets on poles outside of stores, but the way home would generally be pitch black unless you had your own torch or something to carry. Wow, I feel bad. Because you could easily get jumped if you weren't careful. I'd like to know what each of the 5 expenses on the temple's ledger refer to, namely divine will, offerings to the gods, flowers for the gods, water for the gods, and divine compassion. Divine will is described as being the greatest expense, so is that payment for the blue robes? I'm also interested in knowing how they are differentiate sources of income. Did they write things like budget from the Archduke, taxes, the Harvest Festival, etc.? On the expense sheet, divine will refers to the payment for the High Bishop and the blue robes. On income sheets, it refers to the budget received from the Archduke. Offerings to the gods are for ceremonial expenses, so flowers, incense, cloth, etc. Flowers for the gods refers to clothing and other fashion expenses for the flower offering Grey Shrine maidens, which originated from the cost of preparing the temple for noble visitors. Water for the gods refers to hosting fees such as wine, feasts, and the like. On the occasion where nobles would visit, those in the temple would get to enjoy the food as well, which led to priests actively trying to secure more visitors. Divine compassion refers to the expenses for the orphanage, robes for the priests, cleaning tools, etc. Any income that doesn't come from the Archduke's budget is referred to as a gift from the gods. These are differentiated using descriptions like gift from X. During the healing ritual in Part 2, Ferdinand declared that mine is under his protection. How exactly was that statement understood by those present? Did they assume he planned to do something with her in the future and was warning others to keep away? It didn't have any kind of deeper meaning. He was quite simply saying that he would be acting as her guardian. Like, if you wish to propose to her or some such, you must consult me. You may not do as you like to her. You may not do as you like with her, essentially. So, yeah. Mine was baptized as Karstad's daughter, but from an outside perspective, that would mean she'd done apprentice work in the temple before being baptized. Isn't that a big contradiction from a noble's point of view? There's also the point about how one can't act publicly before being baptized, but she was helping the Knight's Order. What groundwork and such did they need to establish to make that possible? The work that mine did was supposed to have been done by adults in the first place, and Sylvester and Karstad had announced ahead of time that they were going to be bringing an underage apprentice to the ceremony for manner-related reasons. And I simply ended up thinking, I know she was underage, but I didn't realize they meant that underage. The temple is understood to be a place for people who aren't nobles, so they don't really think too much about them doing things that aren't considered noble-like. Okay. When mine and Sylvester were attacked during spring prayer, it was shown that devouring soldiers from Ehrenbach were involved. Does that mean the duchy barrier doesn't react to those with as little mana as devouring soldiers? And that they didn't have to pass through the border gate? They passed through the border gate with their master to reach a certain Ehrenfestgeeb, and then they received orders to launch their attack. That was why the duchy barrier didn't react. Okay. From Sylvester's perspective, is he spoiling mine more than his own children, particularly considering that he lets her stay in the temple and still see her family sometimes? He doesn't view it as spoiling her, since he assigned her to be the High Bishop and makes her participate in religious ceremonies. Lysgang nobles are certainly glaring daggers at him for having her stay in the temple, though, so he does acknowledge that he's being at least a little selfless. Okay, in Part 3, Volume 1, when Lampert asks Ferdinand what happened to Rosemine, Ferdinand avoids the question. But what did he say in the coming days? Everyone was so caught up in the Rosemine faceplant incident that nobody followed up on it. If someone were to ask him again, he would in turn ask about Lampert's shortcomings as a guard knight or about recent events to avoid answering. He had no intention of actually responding to anyone from the very beginning. Oh, he's dodging the question. Why did Ferdinand say as expected after seeing Rosemine's baptism medal? She had described the drink as being sweet when he peered into her memory, so he predicted that she has all the elemental attributes, much like he does himself. That prediction was only strengthened when she forcibly used her mana to give a blessing of all the elements to her family. Has Sylvester ever gone to the Italian restaurant on his own? This includes any times he might have sneaked inside. No, he can simply have his own chefs prepare the food in the castle, and since one needs an introduction to enter the restaurant, he wouldn't be able to sneak in. Rosemine would also inevitably find out if Sylvester ever returned, and she has made it clear to him just how much of a pain that would be for her. If it went public that mine hid those letters she thought were love letters, would she be punished for her crime? Or has Ferdinand already taken care of it? Ferdinand has already taken care of it. He delivered them and simply said it seems there were still more. As far as the public is concerned, they were never hidden to begin with. The standard fashion for nobles is to wear clothes with an excessive amount of cloth, with it being considered shameless to show one's legs. But what about Bridget's dress? Is it okay to show bare shoulders, arms, etc.? Rosemine's mothers approved it, so there's no issue. There existed clothing without shoulders before Bridget's dress after all. That said, the initial debut of the dress at a faction tea party revealed that many thought the arms were too revealing, so that was adjusted a bit. Let's see. In the Part 3, Volume 1 short story, One Stressed Out Chef, the cake Lace brought was put in the winter prep room, but no matter how cold it might have been in there, it was still in summertime. Would it have been fine to eat despite it being a melee fuel made with cream? The summers in Ehrenfest aren't the same as summers in Japan, and the winter prep room really is cold. It's a common storage area for those in the lower city. Also, it wasn't melee fuely, it was melee crepe and sponge cake. And as indicated in the line about them made the finishing touches, cream hadn't been added yet. Are those who aren't knights taught to make armor from face stones? Wouldn't mine's gathering have gone better if she had been taught? It takes quite a lot of skill and experience to supply mana to one's high beast armor and gathering tools all at once without a staff. High beasts are required for travel, and so that was prioritized instead. Maybe they might have taught her if she'd had more time to practice. But Rosemine's schedule was becoming busier and busier, so they simply didn't have the chance. They wouldn't have been any help been any helping that anyway. The printing press is more important to her than armor. Agreed. The average walking speed is 4 kilometers per hour, or 32 kilometers if one walks 8 hours per day. Horses travel almost double that speed at 62 kilometers per day. It took several days to reach the goddess's bath from Faunerdorf, and if we assume the journey takes 10 days by horse, or 20 days by foot, then we end up with a distance of 620 kilometers. Even if we account for snowy and mountain roads, that would mean there's an empty wasteland somewhere with a diameter of over 200 kilometers. Could it be that the journey from Faunerdorf didn't take several days by horse, but actually several hours? This is an entirely different world, as such calculations aren't really applicable. First of all, they weren't traveling on paved roads, and rather than moving over gentle hills, they were going through a snowy forest at the base of a mountain, which slowed them down even more. It's also important to keep in mind that the neighboring towns and farms were empty since everyone was gathered together in winter mansions. Horses need rest just like humans do, but the absence of stagecoaches meant they couldn't be swapped out. And with no inns to stay in, the group had to spend the daylight hours searching for suitable campgrounds, setting up camp, etc. Not to mention, given the season, there were fewer daylight hours than usual, which meant they had fewer than 8 hours per day to travel. On top of that, babies that might be short work for a single noble can end up taking several kilometers much longer to defeat, especially when you take the laying of traps into consideration. Babies hunting takes a lot of extra time, which further decreases how much one can travel in a day. Also, and this is incredibly important since it's a Jurgenschmidt thing, their destination being the goddess's bath means the road will vary in complexity depending on the visitor's gifts and attitudes. Not everyone could travel the absolute shortest distance and reach their destination in the absolute shortest time as Rosemine's group did. Okay. Prior to gathering her spring ingredient, Rosemine and the temple group offered sweets to the statue. Did the sweets disappear after that, or did the people eat them? They vanished. Incidentally, the sweets that were spread out were eaten by small lights. Did the fantasy-like events of the goddess bath occur due to Flutrane's influence after all? Were the small lights being eaten the goddess's way of interacting with the world? The goddess's bath is a place where mana of the water element gathers more easily, and the tiny lights were mana clumps, which are a treat for babies. Them being of the water element helps prayers reach the spring's subordinate gods and allows the world to be more easily influenced. Okay, Lutz and the others ate river fish while living in Ilgner. Was any served to Rosemine during her stay, or was she not given any due to it being unidentifiable? Fran and Monica were responsible for serving her meals, and so they only gave her food that they deemed acceptable. Things they hadn't seen before, that didn't seem easy to eat with cutlery, or that would have been a problem for them as leftovers, were not selected. What would happen to Wilfrid if he got disowned? Good question. He would be unable to remain as the Archduke's son, and would be sent to the temple to signify that he is no longer a noble. Naturally, he would no longer attend the Royal Academy. If he were to publicly defy Sylvester and Veronica's honor, a gentle punishment would be to send him to the Ivory Tower, while a more fitting one would be to execute him alongside Veronica. Yet they haven't executed her yet. Lampert had some uneasy thoughts after seeing Rosemine's blessing at her debut. Is he not obligated to share them with Wilfrid as his retainer? Rosemine was adopted due to her abundance of mana, and the blessing was a necessary move to show the nobles just how valuable she really is. Not to mention, it was the start of winter socializing. Wilfrid's retainers needed to protect him while dealing with other nobles, and one wouldn't say anything to make their lord more depressed than he already was. Let's see. Why is it that Wilfrid looks forward to and enjoys spending time with his parents so much? The heck? There's no way it's already almost time. No, it's not. I was about to say, I thought I heard the bus. I was like, wait a minute. But no, I'm probably hearing the garbage truck. It's probably what I'm hearing. So much when prior to his baptism, he spent almost all of his time with Veronica. Veronica seems like the type of person who wouldn't praise anyone but Sylvester and Wilfrid himself. Surely she fed him all sorts of negative things about Florencia. Do you not have any relatives whom you don't see very often but always look forward to meeting up with? Because they always shower you with love when you're together? Wilfrid saw his grandmother as his main family, with his parents being more distant relatives, but he always looked forward to seeing them. It's a joy of a noblewoman to phrase insults in a way that makes them sound perfectly harmless. If Wilfrid had sharper senses, or had been a little more mature, Perhaps he might have realized that Veronica's words were always laced with hate and cynicism. Why didn't Wilfred start to panic about Rosamund causing so many revolutions? Despite all the wealth her revolution brings to Ehrenfest, Rosamund is doing it all for her own purpose. Wilfred was more focused on making up for what he lacked than getting involved in the hobbies of others. Why was Wilfred's re-education handled so poorly? Florencia finally regained the opportunity to raise him, and yet she doesn't appear to do much with it. I don't think her being too busy is a good excuse either. Did they assume it was fine to leave things so half-baked because he was already good enough to be as an Archduke candidate? Florencia isn't to blame for her son's half-baked teaching. His head attendant Oswald is. Entering the northern building put someone in a state of semi-isolation, so the most Florencia could do was check up on him at regular intervals. The main priority when it comes to learning is checking whether the person can do certain things. Wilfred was fixed up right before his debut, but in terms of actual knowledge, he remained far behind. He could play one Harpspiel song but nothing more, for example. If Rosamund hadn't told Wilfred that Veronica was a true criminal, when would he have found that out? It seemed like Charlotte had already been informed by her own retainers. Did they delay telling Wilfred to prioritize educating him for his debut and firing his existing retainers? They were planning on waiting until everything had calmed down, so maybe before he left for the Royal Academy? It ultimately would have depended on Sylvester. Florencia was unable to tell Wilfred because she would have invariably gotten emotional, which could have harmed their relationship moving forward. Charlotte was able to deduce it because Florencia rejoiced over Veronica's arrest. Florencia, for her part, had felt guilty that she was relieved, while her husband was so distraught over having to punish his own mother. Okay. Florencia had Hartmut's father, Guy Bleisgang's half-brother, sharing a father among her retainers, so why didn't she know anything about Wilfred's education? I suppose Veronica just didn't tell anyone anything? It's not like she knew nothing at all. She was aware that he was lagging behind in the same way that Sylvester did through regular reports. What surprised them was just how terrible the true state of affairs really was. She had believed Sylvester maybe 70% when he said that he used to be the same as Wilfred, and she just assumed that with Veronica raising him, Wilfred would end up as educated as his father. This belief was highly influenced by Florencia's thinking that this was just standard behavior for members of the Ehrenfest archducal family. Also, neither Wilfred's retainers nor Veronica disclosed any details about Wilfred's education. Would you, if you were in their position? Your son is such a failure that we are planning to get rid of him alongside Lady Veronica. We will raise either Lady Charlotte or Lord Melkor to be the next Ob, so give up on Lord Wilfred. As of part 3, what do Cornelius and Angelica think of Daniel? They may have all known each other for a while by that point, but surely they'd have some thoughts on Elena being a retainer and receiving instructions for all the guard knights before anyone else. Or do they think nothing of him, assuming that he'll be removed from service before long? Bridget accepted Daniel receiving instructions in the temple because he was used to the environment and she wasn't. At times, she ended up being frustrated with him, but she kept this to herself. Angelica has heartfelt respect for Daniel because she knows she wouldn't have passed her classes without him. Cornelius is generally just in awe that Daniel so politely and diligently keeps up with Rosamund's unreasonable expectations. It seems to me that Daniel is better at doing simple desk work and following unreasonable demands from his superiors than normal scholars. Is he better at scholar work than Heinrich, the actual scholar of the family? Daniel was trained by Ferdinand in a situation where failure was quite literally cost him his life. So he was forced to become better whether he liked it or not. In some ways, the temple is the epitome of an evil corporation. Oh boy. During the Rosamund rescue operation, Ferdinand says to think they would use that, of all things, about a potion. Is it a potion that hinders the flow of mana? Yes, if you change the flow of mana using a potion, the person won't be able to use their mana like they usually do, which prevents them from counterattacking. The potions are convenient enough that even a commoner could carry them around. How much of an impact does mental fortitude have on the effectiveness of the Rosamund compression method? What would the before/after look like for Sylvester, Karstedt, and Ferdinand? There's a lot more to it than just knowing the mana compression method, just like when some women find efficient exercise-based diets. It largely depends on how serious they're about it, how strictly they adhere to it, and how long they keep it up for. My answer to your second question would be vary pretty drastically depending on when exactly after is. I wanted to ask about the management of the parchment copies of magic contracts. The parchment for guild-related contracts was in a room that Freda could access. What kind of room are Ehrenfest contracts stored in? I would think the scholar in charge of them would have to be very high-ranking and able to deal with tight security. Are they bound by a magic contract too? Also, I'm curious about whether the countrywide contracts about the Rosemine compression method are stored in a room out inside the World Academy, or whether they're somewhere else in the Sovereignty. Magic contracts simply burn up and disappear, so there are no copies unless someone goes out of their way to make them. Commoners who use magic contracts for business purposes, Benno included, are required to bring copies to the Merchants Guild, which is why there was a room there dedicated to them. Magic contracts between nobles are different, however. There's a storeroom for those deeply involved with the running of the duchy that normal scholars manage, but not all of them have to go there. The proper magic tools for the Rosemine compression method contracts were ordered, but there was no obligation to send copies anywhere. Did Georgine become the first wife of Ehrenbach through subterfuge, or was it just a coincidence? The first wife of Ehrenbach is not such a trivial position that one can assume it by chance. So I'm assuming yes, subterfuge. Is there anyone other than Riarda who doesn't believe Rosemine is Karstad's child? No, only those very close to Karstad are able to notice his subtle tales when he lies. His mother might have noticed were she still alive. Okay, so nobody else can tell unless they know him very well and can notice when he lies. Does Bonifacius truly believe that Rosemine is his blood-related granddaughter? He doesn't think she's Elvira's child, but he does at least believe that Karstad is her father. I know that all nobles make and carry their own Jarive around, but do they also have a full bathtub of the stuff in their hidden rooms? Knights and such store them because they serve as their lifeline. Rosemine initially didn't realize that 2 years had passed when she woke up from her Jarive because Ferdinand hadn't changed at all. Why didn't he look any older? A lot of growth happens between the years of 8 and 10, or 13 and 15, but this isn't really the case for a 22-year-old turning 24. In fact, Ferdinand looked his oldest when Mine first met him, since that was when he was being completely drained of mana and having to endure an exhausting amount of work. Now that I think about it, that's probably how he looked when Rosemine woke up. Yeah, probably. Because, yeah, he was being overworked by that point because she was asleep that time. How did Ferdinand feel when Rosemine finally woke up safely after 2 years in the Jarive? Awake at last, I see. Fool, you were away for much too long. Good grief, you certainly are a handful. What is Lord Ferdinand's birth season and mana color? Publicly, his birth season is spring. His mana has all the elemental attributes, so it's pretty much pure white like a pearl. But since there isn't much bias for any other element, the color ends up pretty faint. It seems to me that Ferdinand is trusting Mine's chefs somewhat blindly. Should he not be on guard against them, even if they are commoners? He didn't trust them from the start. He closely examined the situations where Mine spoke about her lower city connections and recommended the food that her chefs made. To be honest, it would be more accurate to say that he trusts the judgment of his former attendant, Fran, rather than her chefs. If attendants need their own attendants, how did Ferdinand live before entering the temple when he could only trust Justice? Justice must have had his own retainers and his servants, and I assume Ferdinand wouldn't be able to trust them. Just as Riarda's attendants don't make themselves known or interact with Rosemine, Justice's attendants and servants would never interact with Ferdinand unless he explicitly went to Justice's estate. Attendants and servants only move between family members, like married couples, parents, and children, etc. The main duty of Justice's attendants is to keep his living environment in order, as their work never required them to be seen by Ferdinand. I thought Ferdinand gave up on marriage when he went to the temple, but his father gave him an estate to live with a potential future wife. What did he think about that? I recall him always mentioning that to Mine that it is the duty of nobles to produce children, but he seems to be neglecting that duty himself. He likely would have married someone had an available partner existed. There simply weren't any houses with enough mana to match his own, nor was anyone willing to accept him while Veronica was in power. He said all that to Mine because her position in noble society was weak in more ways than one, and getting married and subsequently having children would have brought her safety. Women who have a great deal of mana and can bear children are treated quite well. Why didn't Ferdinand kill Veronica with poison or something? Veronica was his father's wife. It would have been too risky for Ferdinand to kill her while his father was still alive. Subsequently, killing her around the time his father died would have been considered a declaration of war against Sylvester. Ferdinand joined the temple during that period, and it would have been far from wise to throw Ehrenfest into a panic after having withdrawn from politics, especially considering that there were overwhelmingly more nobles benefiting from Veronica than when there were nobles benefiting from Ferdinand. He could have gone rogue and assassinated her on his own, but he wouldn't have done something so reckless. Yeah. When Ferdinand returned to noble society, it was said that no unmarried woman had a man quality compatible with his own. There was, however, one married woman. Was it Florencia? It was Veronica. Really? Ew! No! He would rather die, or have his man parts chopped off than do that, than do her. Hell no. She's the child of an Ehrenbach Archduke candidate and the first-generation Gabe Groschel, who was at the time considered the most suitable person in Ehrenfest to become Ob. I would like to know more about Baron Blond. Given that he's a baron, he must be a lay noble, but has he ever asked about the Gilberta Company to introduce him to Rosemine? Nobles may recommend stores to each other, but some commoner merchants are never put in intermediary situations where they are introduced one noble to another. If the relationship soured, the merchant will be putting themselves at risk of being executed. Merchants live long only by interacting with noble society as little as possible. Ow. Frida signed a concubine contract with the late noble Heinrich, but due to her connection with Rosemine, she ends up being in the presence of Ob Ehrenfest himself. If her contract continues as planned, and she ends up a concubine kept out of sight, wouldn't that be considered a slight against the Archduke? I assume Heinrich's social position would be damaged as a result. Why would it be rude when the Archduke hasn't ordered the signed contract to be nullified? It was the chefs who made the food, not Frida. And on top of that, Sylvester doesn't even know about Heinrich's contract with her. Even if Sylvester did know, it's normal for commoners to become concubines, so he wouldn't consider it something that he needs to interfere with. The contract would ultimately be left alone. We already know that the Panda Bus recreates the steering wheel, pedals, seatbelts, and such, but does it recreate glass windows too? The windows aren't made of glass, but a membrane of mana that's transparent and can be seen through while driving. Since the whole high beast is a stretched out stone to begin with, Rosemine isn't really concerned about what the materials are. Mine's artistic sense is insulted at every turn. Is that because cartoonish art isn't normal in Jürgen Schmidt? Or because her art really is bad and she just doesn't realize it? Both. Those in Jürgen Schmidt struggle to accept her art because there's no culture for the cartoony style, and as for her artistic senses, well, to give an analogy, it would be like someone on Earth today creating a cartoonish cockroach and driving around in it. Those who like bugs may find it amusing, but no matter how cartoonish it gets, most people won't accept it. The problem becomes not whether the cartoonish style is cute or not, but rather why one would choose a cockroach in the first place. Everyone would essentially be like, why a cockroach? Please go with a rabbit or something instead. Rosemine sometimes thinks that she'll be killed if she opposes Sylvester or Ferdinand, but what would they actually do if she defied them? Say she began seriously trying to become Ob Ehrenfest, for example. If Sylvester's own son would be punished for treason by being sent to the temple or being executed, then a former commoner like Rosemine would undoubtedly lose her life. Ferdinand would take responsibility for having made Rosemine a noble by using a loophole in the magic contract to execute her. Alternatively, if Ferdinand was unable to perform this duty for some reason, one of the Archduke's retainers who didn't sign the magic contract would do it. There are several border gates across Ehrenfest, but how much traffic do the ones to Klassenburg and Ehrenbach actually see? The gate between Klassenburg and Ehrenfest sees almost no traffic because those in Klassenburg view Ehrenfest as irrelevant. The gates to Frembeltag and Ehrenbach, however, do see some traffic from merchants and nobles. Outsider nobles were forbidden from entering the nobles' quarter in Part 2, but despite the Ehrenfest leaders' concerns, they didn't forbid travel to the duchy in general. What do people in Jürgen Schmidt think of swimming and bathing suits? Are knights the only ones who learn to swim, presumably as part of their training? People don't have opportunities to swim in the duchies that don't border oceans, so there's no real reason for them to learn. As for the bathing suits, if anyone went outside wearing one, everyone would just think, how shameless. Knights remain fully armored even when entering bodies of water. Wow. Both noble and commoner women change their hairstyles and the length of their skirts as they grow older, but do men change their clothing or such as they age? Male commoners and nobles wear shorts until they turn 10, but from that point onward, they wear the same style as adults. There aren't really any clear changes like there are with women. In the past, when one only obtained their staff after reaching adulthood, they were given magic weapons at the age of 10. Are there any fey beasts other than shoemills that lower city commoners are able to hunt? Perhaps the young of certain fey beasts? Naturally, shoemills aren't the only fey beasts they can hunt. They go after the young of some fey beasts, as you say, but the fun ends when the parent fey beast comes out. Yeah. Say mine gathered the Peru from a tree, would she get a special Peru dye with her mana? If she gripped the fruit rather than the branch and poured her mana into it, she would get a face stone, not a Peru. If mine had regularly drained her mana by gathering Perus and participating in the Star Festival, could she have survived without becoming an apprentice shrine maiden? She has more mana than can be managed like that, so she would have died before the coming of age. Probably around 10 years at the latest. She might have even been detained as some kind of dangerous trauma-making person and executed. If you think about how Gunter would have felt having to arrest his own daughter, we can be thankful that she was able to join the temple. Oh, he would have been crushed. Were recipe books already available before Rosemine started making and selling them, or are books considered too rare and valuable for that kind of thing? Most chefs are commoners, so it's safe to assume they're illiterate. Also, even if a noble went into their kitchen, the chefs wouldn't be able to give them detailed recipes or anything. No other recipe books exist as a result. Chefs just learn how to make good food at home, or observe others cooking and steal their techniques. Some families of chefs have diaries in which they make notes like, I did X and it worked well, but the whole recipe is never listed. Huh? Excuse me? What? If commoners continue to eat Rosemine's cooking, will more of them develop the devouring? As others have stated, Rosemine's cooking methods will have an impact on the mana quantity of nobles. Well, in the very long term at least, so will the same happen to commoners? What? If a family continues to eat the food for several generations, then it will have some impact, but it'll be trivial compared to how much more mana one gets from the compression method. Who said that? Who said how her food could possibly cause people for the devouring? Is there a reason why Shisaria's shield only blocks people who bear malice toward Rosemine rather than anyone Rosemine doesn't want to enter? Because anyone who fails to enter Shisaria's shield will very likely die, and Rosemine sees that as pretty extreme punishment for those who aren't actively trying to harm her. There's also why she normally only uses the shield in very dangerous situations. During such times, Rosemine will even allow those she doesn't particularly like into her shield as long as they have no malicious intent. Mine automatically learned some of the language spoken in Ehrenfest when she reincarnated. Is she still relying on the auto-translation now that she's a noble? It seems like she's envisioning Earth numbers and then writing them in the Jürgen Schmidt language. The only words that mine automatically picked up were those one would expect a sickly 5-year-old who spends all day in bed to know, which means she was at most able to communicate with her family. There was a ton that she didn't know and needed to learn herself. She memorized numbers by looking at the written prices of various goods and thinking things like, this is 0, this is 3. Being able to find the entrance to the castle amid a blizzard seems unreasonable, even assuming that people have magnetic sensors or something. What method do you imagine they used to find their way? It's related to feeling mana. That's why only the adults are allowed to do outside work during this period. It's like hunting the Lord of Winter. Also, knights are trained to manipulate the mana of surrounding enemies, so they're more sensitive to mana than most. Retainers address each other without titles like Lord and Lady because they're co-workers, right? Yes, incidentally, when meeting with a noble of an unknown rank from another duchy for the first time, it is customary to default to Lord or Lady. Are children not assigned scholars before attending the Royal Academy? We've known about Rosemine and Wilfried having attendants and guard knights for a while, but I don't think any scholars have been mentioned. Nobles need the services of attendants and guard knights from the moment they're born, but not so much the service of scholars. People only select scholars following their baptism. Where are Jürgen Schmidt coins made? There are designs on the coins in the manga version, but are there those something Suzaku-sama made on her own? They're made in the Sovereignty. The designs are Suzaku-sama's originals. Do children of the Archduke have any opportunity to spend time with children their age, other than siblings of the same mother? Sometimes, if children of relatives on the mother's side of the family are in the same duchy, or if their parents' highly trusted friends have children, Generally speaking, though, it's difficult due to the status imbalance. I know the nobles have last names, but what would they be when formally written out? I would particularly like to know the full name for mine, Sylvester, Elvira, Daniel, and Gabe Ilgner. Good Lord Almighty, these are long. Okay, Rosemine, Tochter, Linkberg, Adoti, Ehrenfest, Sylvester Ob Ehrenfest, Elvira Tochter, Gothel, Frau Linkberg, Daniel Son Burnett, Helfried Armboss, Gabe Ilgner. Why is Karstedt an archnoble despite being Boniface's son? Are all children of Archduke candidates archnobles by default? When the next Archduke hasn't been decided, the children of Archduke candidates are also raised as Archduke candidates in the event that one of their parents becomes the Ob, since their parents would subsequently need a successor. Despite another Ob having been selected, his children were all girls, and he did not plan on taking a second wife. So Karstedt remained an Archduke candidate until Sylvester was born. That is why he is an archnoble now. Okay. On average, how differently are the children of a first wife and the children of a second wife treated? There is no average, since it depends on the father's personality, the relationship between mothers, the influence of the mother's families, the children's manic capacities and talent, etc. In the event of the first wife being extremely powerful, the children of the second wife are basically ignored. Likewise, if the second wife marries in from a more powerful family, her children will be prioritized. That said, this all changes depending on the house in question and the generation. Had Veronica's influence continued for another 10 years, Elvira's children likely would have been ostracized, with Nicholas being the family's successor. There seems to be a system of men having multiple wives, but is the reverse also true? Do female Obs ever have 2 or more husbands? And do the husbands of female Obs ever have second or third wives? It's rare, but sometimes female Obs do have multiple husbands. The husbands of female Obs never have second or third wives, although they do have concubines. How are noble children with too little mana to be taken into the family treated after becoming servants? Are they isolated from their parents and siblings? They wouldn't undergo a noble baptism, so they will publicly be equivalent to commoners. Whether they continue to interact with their parents and siblings depends on their family. But since they're servants, there will inevitably be a master-servant relationship. Do commoners or nobles ever have twins, triplets, etc.? It feels as though it would be a rare occurrence, since commoners lack the stamina and nobles have mana problems. But do they exist in Jurgenschmidt? They do exist, and things are just as you imagine. It's rare for their births to be safe among commoners due to stamina and nutrition issues. And in the case of nobles, twins and the like are born with less mana, as they are rarely raised as nobles. Both twins tend to become servants for their family. What happened to the metal and citizenship of commoners who marry someone from another duchy? Commoners living in the lower city send the temple a request for an interduchy marriage during the Star Festival. When the priests have an opportunity to process it, they give a letter of invitation to one of the merchants who regularly visit the temple. The commoner will then bring this letter with them on the day they are summoned to the temple, either the winter coming-of-age ceremony or the spring baptism ceremony, and receive their medal. Those living in the central district or in the land of Gibbs give their moving request to the priest visiting them for the harvest festival, and they will be given their medal at the next spring prayer. Citizenship is attached to the medal, so anyone who loses their medal will also lose their citizenship, their home, and their job all at once. They will need to move to the duchy of their marriage partner at once and deliver the registration fee to a priest during the next Star Festival. The whole process is quite tedious, so no commoner marries someone from another duchy unless one sees an enormous benefit in doing so. What are the duchy medals like for traveling merchants? They're traveling merchants precisely because they don't belong to a duchy. They have no medals, nor do they get baptized, have coming-of-age ceremonies, or receive graves when they pass away. What time is it? I have a question about hidden rooms. Does the size of the room have to do with the creator's mana? Ferdinand's hidden room is absolutely crammed with stuff, so I had to wonder if all nobles have hidden rooms of the same size, whether they be lay nobles or archduke candidates. The space is created using mana, so it does depend on one's mana quantity. One can choose how big their room is when they initially make it, but after that, its size cannot be altered. Ferdinand made his on the smaller side because he never intended to allow anyone else inside. Also at the time, he didn't intend for his hidden room in the temple to accommodate so much stuff. He has an estate in the noble's quarter after all. How many places like the Ivory Tower are there? In the tower Veronica is being kept in, a special one that holds only her? Where is Count Toad being kept? Count Toad. The Ivory Tower is from imprisoning a member of the archducal family, but there is nobody else detained there at the moment. Count Bindewald is being kept in a jail for noble criminals. I understand that the disastrous state of the orphanage was the result of so many blue priests leaving following the purge. But in that case, what was the temple like before the purge? When Besenwant's reign over the temple was at its best, flower offerings were at an all-time high. Even the blue shrine maidens had many lovers of carnality among them, since they had no expectations of ever leaving the temple. Does Ehrenfest have a red light district or any other forms of prostitution as a business? For nobles, that would be the temple's flower offerings. In the lower city, waitresses fulfill that role, which is what Ella hated and ran away from. Makes sense. Is the baseline mana quantity of each noble rank different from between greater duchies such as Ehrenbach and middle duchies such as Ehrenfest? For example, do men nobles in Ehrenbach have as much mana as archnobles in Ehrenfest? The average mana quantity per noble rank is roughly the same, since any great disparities would impact Royal Academy lessons. The greatest change between greater and middle duchies is the number of people in each rank, which in turn changes what is deemed valuable. Men nobles are entrusted with men noble work, and those among the top end of the lay noble rank may find it easier to live. I believe nobles shape phase stones by visualizing things they've seen before. Does that mean all the animals used for high beasts actually exist? A clear image is necessary, so yes, they'd use animals that actually exist. What was winter socializing like the year Elvira published that book containing that Ferdinand illustrations? They weren't sold officially through the planting company, but stealthily by Elvira at tea parties. The last thing anybody wanted was for the books to be taken away like that illustrations were, so nobody spoke a word about them outside the tea parties. This was contributed to the strengthening of the faction. What duchy was Georgine's former betrothed from, and what was their relationship like? What did she think of him? He was an archduke candidate of the duchy formerly known as Zalsengas and the son of a third wife. It was a normal political marriage, and while there was no love in the relationship, Georgine knew that he would support her when she became Ob, so she liked him about as much as she liked any other noble from her faction. How did Justice meet his wife? What kind of person was she? Why did they divorce? And did they have children? Is there any chance he might remarry in the future? It's important for nobles to marry for the sake of their house, and since Justice was just wandering around non-committedly, his parents eventually found a partner for him, a girl of the Veronica faction. When Justice resolved to serve Ferdinand, he divorced her largely in fear that she might indirectly bring harm to Ferdinand. They had children, but since Justice didn't attend their baptism as a father, they aren't officially his. As for remarrying, well, who knows? He's past the prime marrying age, and he doesn't really care about getting married himself, so the woman in question would need to be very pushy with him to make it happen. When one comes of age and becomes able to sense those with an equivalent amount of mana, do the people they sense also have to be of age? Yes, both people need to be of age to be able to sense the other's mana. Also, they can only sense mana quantity. To check someone's attributes, they would need to look at the color of their mana. In the previous fanbook, you mentioned that anyone's potion would taste sweet to mine because she has the devouring. Does that mean even a lay noble could use the memory-searching magic tool and easily synchronize with her? Her mana would be dyed rapidly if mana was to be poured into her, regardless of whether she drank the synchronization potion that makes mana easier to dye. If the mana was from another person, there'd be a little more resistance, but it wouldn't stop the dyeing process. Are there 365 days in a Jurgen Schmidt in a year? Likewise, is each day 24 hours long? There are 420 days in a year, but there are 24 hours in a day to make things easier for me to keep track of. Thank you. I am curious about the calendar. The term month is often used, but how many days are there in a month? How many months are there in a year? Do the lengths of months change if Shutsaria excels and preserves the autumn for as long as possible, or if Flutrain devotes her all to ending the winter a little sooner? There are 7 days in a week: Water Day, Sprout Day, Fire Day, Leaf Day, Wind Day, Fruit Day, and Earth Day. Then there are 5 weeks in a month: the week of Water, the week of Fire, the week of Wind, the week of Earth, and the week of Life. The seasons change every 3 months on average, but as you can imagine, the autumn extends when Shutsaria does better, and the winter shortens when Flutrain does better, so the length of seasons varies each year. Are calendar dates a thing in the bookverse? When making plans, people always talk about things being X number of days from now, but they never seem to specify dates. There are seasons, so surely people have some way to tell when the season is about to change. Do they have calendars that show when the days of the baptism ceremony and such are? Rather than using dates like we are used to, people might plan around something occurring on the next week of water sprout day. They do have objects that are similar to calendars, though. Few calendars have them for personal reasons, but almost all workplaces have them to indicate when the next Earth Day is, since Earth Day is the official day off. The calendars are boards with 5 rows of 7 holes, with the wooden peg moved from hole to hole each day to indicate the day of the week. When seasons change, the color of timekeeping bells are changed to the divine color of the season as an indication. When the first fan book, you mentioned that you write what you want to write, but do you also visualize when you want to read it? Or who you want to read it? I've never tried to cater to a theoretical person or demographic. I didn't even plan for my writing to end up in print. My 3 main concerns are whether I'm writing something that I want to write, whether I'm writing something that my husband says is entertaining, and whether I'm writing something that I'm fine with my children reading when they grow up. Ooh, pound cake. Okay. Oh, the recipe for pound cake, we get to see it. Oh, okay. Okay, that's finally done. If you want me to read that, the record where they did the report on the CD recording or whatever, if you want me to read that, let me know, and I'll do it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.